we as a society resolve this issue? How do we say that in one case it's okay to protect people, in another case it's not? Because in both cases, we're infringing the rights of people. Now, what happened in North Carolina was the city of Charlotte, trying to protect transgender people, passed a law saying that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity, including you can't prohibit transgender people from using public bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity, not their gender at birth. And the North Carolina legislature overturned that. So the higher level of government overturned what the local level of government did. Right now, in this case, the American Civil Liberties Union has brought a lawsuit in the United States Federal District Court in North Carolina. And it's going to be interesting to see how the court handles this situation. So this is still ongoing. So now we've spoken about the right of expression, the right of self-expression, and the last thing I wanted to talk about was the ultimate right of self-expression, which is the right to vote. Now, eligibility to vote in the United States is established in the federal Constitution and by state law. It's interesting if you look at history, the United States Supreme Court has dealt with the issue on occasion, but the Constitution in the beginning was silent. There were some compromises in passing the United States Constitution, which we'd probably be ashamed of today. Only men could vote. When you counted the population, you counted 3/5 of the black population at the time. And so go back and read the original Constitution. Our history is not so pure. And it's taken amendments to the Constitution, little by little, to guarantee women the right to vote, to prohibit discrimination on the basis of race and color, on the basis of sex. And the United States Constitution now allows 18-year-olds to vote, whereas it used to be 21. So we've had some changes in the Constitution to become a little bit more modern. But a lot of what happens is really through court decisions. Court decisions which reflect the changing mores of our country. Each state has a lot of power to control who gets to vote and doesn't get to vote. And so we have seen, just a little number I came across, 22 states have added some new restrictions over the last few years. The federal government, many years ago, had a Voting Rights Act, knowing that there were places around the country that were discriminating and would find various nefarious ways to discriminate and try to prevent people from voting. And so the law allowed the Justice Department to monitor what these places were doing and to pre-approve any changes in the law. The United States Supreme Court said, in a very close decision, that the law is outdated. It's no longer constitutional because it's based on ancient statistics, and so it should no longer be valid. Once the United States Supreme Court threw that section of the Voting Rights Act, 22 states jumped in and tried to restrict who could vote. So they would say that a student ID in one state is not enough to prove who you are, that you'd have to come in with some kind of state-issued ID. Well, if you don't have a driver's license, or maybe you're a senior citizen who never had a driver's license or lost your driver's license because you're too old, or if you're a college student and the only ID you have is a student ID, well, how do you prove who you are and how do you get to vote? Now, frankly, my comment on this is basically Republicans trying to stop Democrats from voting. There was a time when it was also conservative Democrats trying to stop certain people from voting. But today it seems to be more Republicans. And it seems to be the Democrats on the right side trying to get people into the voting booths. But it's taking the federal courts to make the changes. So we've had a federal court in North Carolina again, striking down their ID law. Wisconsin was their law that banned college students from using expired student IDs and limiting college students' right to vote in the community where they're living. That's been thrown out. Kansas had a system that said, okay, we're not going to monkey with the federal, you can go vote the federal one, but you can't vote locally. Now, if you have established residency, let's say you're living off campus here, and you're now going to be a Westchester resident, why should you not be able to vote here? Why should you have to vote back wherever you came from? Whether it's New Rochelle or New Mexico. You know, you may have more interest in Pleasantville than you do there, and so you want to vote here. Why should you be banned from doing that? Well, that was thrown out. North Dakota had one thrown out, and so did Texas. So the federal courts have intervened, but this also is an ongoing battle. So even though the Constitution is 100 and, how many years now? 87? Let's see, how many years is that? 140, 130, somebody do some math for me. 139 years, there we go. 139 years old. The issues are still there, and the resolution of those issues is still evolving. So that's all I have to say. If you have some time and you're interested in this, just go to the New York Times. I mean, there's a fascinating article back in August 1, 2016. There's a whole article about free speech on campus, which I found fascinating. I'm sorry to say that the guys who I think are right here are conservatives. I happen to be a liberal Democrat, but there's a group out there that's fighting to protect open free speech on campuses, because by and large it's the conservatives who are getting beat down. But my view on this stuff is that how do you know you're right unless somebody challenges it? Isn't that what you're going to school for? To learn how to think, to learn how to critically look at stuff, and to say that's right and that's wrong? You're not going to have somebody there for the rest of your life telling you what to think. You got to learn how to think for yourself. And if you can't be challenged in school, where can you be challenged? And in my judgment, that is what's getting lost in this whole discussion. Not that we're in favor of rape on campus, not that we're in favor of sexism or racism, whatever. But you got to understand those very issues, and the only way you're going to understand those issues if there's somebody on the other side making arguments, and then you can decide for yourself, and then you can argue back. Because the real world, as you can see, if you take a look at the presidential election, there's lots of views at this moment in this country. No candidate has 50% of the vote. And you sometimes wonder how some of the candidates, I mean, there's one candidate out there, the Libertarian candidate, who a lot of young people are flocking to. And if you watch what he's saying, he has absolutely no clue about anything. Absolutely none. And he's being supported by conservatives and by liberals. And you say, how could both sides with extremes support the same person who knows nothing? And you're in a situation here where they're disenchanted with the two major party candidates, so they're looking hard for somebody else, rather than trying to discern the difference between the two major party candidates, one of whom is going to win. And so by default, by voting for I'm not going to make this into a political discussion, but think about it. Are you throwing away your vote? Are enough people going to vote for a third party? Now, that's happened in the past. My history is not real good, but I think way back when, did somebody get elected? Who's the history buffs around here? When Teddy Roosevelt, or maybe he lost, but
third party candidate? No, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know who was. No, I know what you're talking about, but
right? I mean, some third parties have played major roles.
Chris Abraham.
Well, did Lincoln get elected that way?
Yeah, he was a part of like a different from the Republican Party. I don't remember the exact.
Right. But the point is, there is a role for third parties.
Yeah.
The question is, this year, what does this third party stand for? There's two of them. There's two of them out there. What do they stand for? Well, if you yourself don't have the ability to analyze and ask these questions, because you didn't train yourself to do that, because you were spoon-fed all the way through school, well, what good is your education, and how does it apply to real life? So I'm just trying to argue in favor of what I think is the original intent of the Constitution, and what I think its current meaning really is. That's all I have to say. Somebody jump in.